Good morning, day 214. Oh my gosh. Look at this. Oh, yes. Do you know how healthy it is to get bright sunlight in the morning? Um, anyway, speaking of health, we're going to hear from a physician now, named Luke, the book of Luke. He is a physician, and I'm calling today setting the stage. I wasn't really sure. I don't know. I had to really sit with this one a long time. But the concept of like a play and a director and a stage were all coming to mind because that's kind of what he did. He set the stage with God as the great director and us as players or actors in a role, looking for the perfect actors to fulfill his great play. And like we're all in our lives, whether we realize it or not, kind of auditioning for certain roles. But even Luke, as he's writing his account, he sets the stage for how he is going to be, the perspective that he is going to bring, or how he is attempting to do his best to represent the full story. He says, I've heard all of these accounts. I know other people have these accounts, but I have really been diligent about trying to make sure that I am presenting the full story and with evidence and as truthfully as I possibly can. Now, that's me paraphrasing him. And he even starts it off almost like writing a letter, and it says, "Dear Theophilus." And Theophilus might be a person, we don't know. But the word Theophilus also means love or friend of God. So right there, we are being addressed. We can take that as being addressed by him as friends or those that love God. And here I'm going to do my best as a person of detail that needs to know how one thing relates to another. Doctors have to do that. If they just came in and you just told them and they only dealt with what's in front of them, although that does happen sometimes, and they don't dig further to find the root cause and they're only treating the symptoms, a good doctor is going to want to know, okay, let's figure out where this started. Let's set the stage of how this disease or illness has been able to take root in your life. And I know what the end product is now, but let's see if we can figure it out and maybe solve a dilemma. And I think that's part of what he's bringing all of himself and how he views the world, and even as a doctor, to the table for us when he takes a look at not just Jesus's life, but before it, like really setting the stage. He takes us way back to before even John the Baptist is born and the importance of John the Baptist's role, but even before that, the parents of John the Baptist, and that is Zachariah and Elizabeth. And they are both from different priestly families, so they're both priests. And Zachariah and they're old, that we are introduced to them in their old age, and they don't have children, but they found favor in the eyes of God. And God sees that they have been living righteously and trying to do their best they can to, follow the rules like from their heart. So, if God finds them to be righteous, and that point is made very intentionally, that they're not just going through the motions. Like they love God and they're trying to do their best to serve, and even in their roles as priests. And Zachariah is in the temple serving his priestly duties and going in to burn incense when he is met by Gabriel. And Gabriel lets him know, hey, We've been watching you. I don't know if you know, but you've been auditioning for a role. We've been waiting for you and waiting for the right time. But it's time now, and you've been selected. Congratulations. And you're going to become a father now. And your son is going to have the Holy Spirit in him. And he's going to pave the way for the Son of God. But your son's going to have the spirit of Elijah in him. And Zachariah's like, what? But I'm old. I can't, like, this won't work. I can't believe this. And Gabriel, the angel, says, okay, well, since you don't believe it and now you're showing some doubt, I'm going to take away your speech until your son's born. And so he loses the ability to speak, and he comes out and he's waving his hands. They probably think they understand that he's had a vision. Something happened in the temple, but he can't talk about it. But Elizabeth does in fact become pregnant. She goes into seclusion for 5 months. And then we are introduced to Mary. And Mary is a relative of Elizabeth's. So, and she is engaged to be married to Joseph, who we're also told is the son of David. So it's like, God is the great director here. He's setting the stage. He was waiting for all of the stars of his show to align. Ooh, that was a good one. And here he's got it. Like, he had his eye on these. He's watching probably all the people, but these two catch his eye. They've made the cut, the final cut, and they're going to be put in the show. And then meanwhile, and they also fit the requirements because she's got a cousin or a relative, Mary. Mary is a willing vessel who is also married to the right lineage. Like, it just all comes together. And he had to probably wait and keep his eye. He probably had pre-chosen Zachariah and Elizabeth, but he had to kind of keep an eye on them and make sure that they would be able to live up to what he was going to ask of them. Because again, remember, it is God's design, and he works it all out. And part of the reason I think it's all taking so very long is because he also decided to give people free will. So all these people, finally, it all lined up. You got to wonder, were there other people that were auditioning and they didn't really understand that they were auditioning? And that's what we need to understand. We are all auditioning. And we don't know the great play, the great director, and how it all lines up, and even how just being related to the right people and in relationship with the right people, how all of that needs to sort of come into place, and everybody exercising their free will along with God's sovereignty falls into place. Like, what? And I think that's what Luke stepped back, as a good physician does, and he kind of looks at the whole picture, and he's like, holy smokes, look at this. Like, this was important. Like, it was clicking in his head, and seeing the relationship way back before either John or Jesus was conceived. And even to continue the analogy of a play and a director and a stage, exit stage, right? It's really interesting. After Jesus is born, okay, so here, there's so much detail in here. Okay, so Jesus, Mary is pregnant. I don't even think she has just had her encounter with Gabriel, and Gabriel telling her that she's going to get pregnant, and she's like, but I'm a virgin, but I'm willing. Okay, that happens. She becomes pregnant. She goes to visit her relative, Elizabeth. Elizabeth knows right away. Her baby jumps for joy at just the sound of Mary's voice. Now remember, her baby's already filled with the Holy Spirit. And So Elizabeth immediately knows, oh my gosh, you've been blessed. You have a baby, and it's probably like this big now. Women, I think, have a leg up on men in this department, because we do like carry something from nothing, like this, that little cell that turns into and grows, like being the carrier and a vessel and co-creator of new life, but the one that actually like is affected by that and the miracle of all of that. Like sometimes I think women, we have an advantage over men. Our minds are able to really go places maybe a little bit more easily, in miraculous ways, and with the mystery and the divinity of things. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but I know I certainly feel like I have an openness to that anyway. So anyway, where I was going with all of this, setting the stage, is that after this, Mary gives a soliloquy. It's really interesting that Luke put this in there, that all of a sudden, we get a pause in the scene, and Mary, it's called the Magnificat, and this is Mary's prayer of praise, I think is what that translates to. And she just goes through, like, I am so blessed. The Lord is going to do all of these things through my son, and he is going to come and, humble the proud and, feed the hungry, anyway, it's a whole big blessing. And it's like a soliloquy. It's like, we pause the scene, the center of the star of the show now, who is Mary, gets her moment in the spotlight and has this beautiful monologue. And then we go back, then we're taken back into the story. John is born, and immediately Elizabeth says his name is John, because that's what Gabriel had told. He had actually told Zechariah that, so somehow Zechariah must have gotten that message to Elizabeth. And then their friends and family are like, but that's not a family name. You can't name him that. No, you can't. And then they go to Zechariah and say, okay, you settle this matter, man. What's his name going to be? He can't speak still, but he asks for a writing tablet, and he confirms, yes, his name is John. And then his speech is restored. So God is working miracles and showing the signs that this is all his doing way before and into when Jesus and John are even conceived. And then he's given the ability to speak, and then he becomes the star of the show, and he does his own soliloquy after the ceremony of circumcision and the naming of the child. The Holy Spirit comes on him, and he does his own praise and kind of prediction of what John's life will be for, and that he is the Holy Spirit and the prophet that is coming to pave the way for the Son of God, or Son of Man, in Jesus. And then it ends with a very nice little statement that they raised John up, and excuse me, they just mowed here. And John grew up strong in spirit. And that is chapter 1 of Luke. It is quite a story, and it definitely is going to set the stage. And even within this, all this detail, Luke is being a good physician there. He's talking about, the dates and the time frame of pregnancy and the different, specific. He's making a really good record. and really trying to trace it back and give us the backstory and setting the stage that God's hand in all of this was very evident and made very evident way before the ministries of John and Jesus started. That it was way back even with their parents, and their parents taking their auditions in this life seriously. And that is sort of like what I realized that it took me until I took my job and my role as a parent pretty seriously when my kids were born. My life shifted quite a bit then. But then only living from the perspective of being somebody else's mom and losing kind of sight of first being a child of God, where it happened off and on. Like I'd kind of wake up and then go, those roles were very confused. Like, what am I doing here? Is my main role as mom, as believer, as wife? Like, it got all muddled up in the humanness of it and trying to people please. I feel like now I'm like, oh, I'm kind of getting it at the level that probably Elizabeth and Zachariah and Mary did, is like, oh, my first and only role, and the one that I'm really auditioning for everything in life for, is understanding that God is the director. He is the great director. This is all his story, his play unfolding, and I need to keep that in mind. And sometimes I get really confused, and I think we all do as humans, thinking that maybe our bosses, our significant others, our children, like all of those people are directors. And that's who we're really auditioning for. And then conversely, are we even treating ourselves that way and making sure that we're putting people through an auditioning phase themselves? Are we just giving them roles because they arrived with roles in our lives and we're just kind of accepting that? Or are we being a little bit more judicious as our own directors in our own lives and kind of making sure we put people through auditions before they get a significant role in our lives? That's a pretty special place. When I look at my position of who I am and whose I am, and making sure that my supporting cast and people sharing my stage have earned the right to be there. And anyway, so this chapter, there are 80 verses, so it is a pretty long chapter as far as Bible chapters go. But gosh, there is a lot. There is a lot to sit there with. And this was where my mind, along with just meditating and praying on it, that God helped me to understand it. But you may look at it totally different, which that is the cool thing. And you're not going to be wrong. I'm not going to be wrong. You're not going to be wrong. God will speak to you in just the way you need to hear it. And that is just what's so cool about the Bible. And you can pull out something very practical about it too. I tell you what, his word is practical. It is applicable. Like this concept of setting the stage and looking at my life, and even myself and God as co-directors in this thing, and the concept of auditioning. Like, am I living from a place of knowing that I'm kind of being watched and that I'm auditioning for roles? Am I taking my life seriously enough and understanding how I might play a role in his story, in somebody else's story, how it could all come together if I do my part and choose wisely and live wisely? Wow. And am I also giving that much credence to other roles and people that are in my life? Not that everybody's not valuable, but they might just not be valuable and right for me in this season. I am called to be wise not just about how I live my life, but how I interact with others and the importance I let other people have in my life. Because ultimately it's about God being the most important, at least to me. So, but wherever you are in your faith walk and journey, open the Bible and see. It's a great book that has a lot of wisdom in it, that's acknowledged by a lot of different, people and traditions and philosophies. Open it up and let it speak to you. Don't try to tell it what it says, but let it speak to you. And stick with it and see if it doesn't have a positive impact on your outlook, your life, and how you approach your life and other people in it. All right. Have a great day. Rise and shine.